down a little. So I can see it.
Is that okay?
I'll see you after class. So we are going to talk a little bit about hip flexors today, and lower and upper hip flexors. We're going to talk about your primary hip flexor and your secondary hip flexor, and when they can go a bit awry and what opposes them, and we're going to work all that stuff. So first, let's talk about your primary hip flexor, which is your psoas. Your psoas goes from your lower back, comes across the front of your hips and hooks onto your leg. Now, it can get short if you sit a lot. It can get short if you have like a military type posture. So if you have no curve in your back and your hips are not forward of the plumb line, that muscle can pull you down onto yourself. That's kind of what it looks like that. And it can compress your ability to breathe. It can compress what's going on in your belly. And it can hold you in a position where you don't have great curve in your back, so you lose the space here. The secondary hip flexors are the quads, more rectus femoris, sartorius, glomerulis. They kind of attach up to this hip bone, and they can pull you like this. So if you see people that have way too much curve in the low back, that's usually a secondary hip flexor issue or quad issue. So we're going to kind of go back and forth between those and make sure that all of that's working so that we can have neutral pelvis, because if you are pulled into this position, what muscles are long? These ones up here, right? So especially that low belly compartment, it can't really do what it needs to do, and so are your glutes. It can't also keep you rooted to the ground or help you lower down safely if they're cranked forward, and you may not line up well in your posture. You may be like way forward. This was my posture before I ever started Egoscue. My entire torso didn't even come into line with my legs. So if I was jumping on the trampoline or something like that, I had no abdominal support and very little glute access to keep my body in the rest of alignment. So you can kind of think about what's happening in your body, and as we go through this today, look at how we're bringing all of that into good alignment, using our belly, using our glutes, using our lengthening the hip flexors that we need to. There's another thing that can happen with hip flexors, this is the last piece I'll talk about, is that you could have a lengthened psoas that you just rest on. So that may look like this, and we kind of call it ski jumping. And it could be that you're just hanging out at the end range of your hip flexors, like nothing else is holding you stable until you get to the edge where it just like literally is being pulled on. So that also can compress the low back. The low back muscles have a hard time turning off if that's happening, but it's not because it's a strong position. It's just because you're like at the path of least resistance and hanging out on those muscles. So we're gonna make all of that work better today. So feet pointed straight ahead, hands into prayer somewhere on your body. Take a deep breath. And begin to line up your ears over your shoulders, over your hips, over your knees, over your ankles. Be right here, right now, for this time to take care of your body, to bring your body into more optimal alignment. This care that we have of our body as a individual and as a community lets us live more fully, more joyfully, more comfortably in our bodies. All right, pigeon toe your feet. So because this posture can be really common where there's some pull in the quad, some tightness, I want you to pigeon toe your feet, toes all the way together, heels out. This is one we use at Egoscue quite a bit. So the sartorius pulls this out, the rectus femoris pulls you forward. So I'm gonna have you pigeon toe your feet and just tighten up your thigh muscles, like really crank those tight. We're gonna hold this for about a minute. Then bring your hands up, open up your shoulders, and as you do that, this can happen really easily. So keep it all in alignment. Shoulders over hips, rib cage in, belly in. Keep that pigeon toe feeling, thighs tight, 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 tight. And notice if they want to be way forward, even hear that internal rotation. Or if it's really different, do you have a place in a knee that you feel? Do you notice something in your pelvis? Tighten up those thighs. Come on, get those quads to activate. Something like this, even for a minute, can help to reposition the hip, especially if you walked in and this was your position and your kind of quads were like pulling you around. This can take you out of it. Reposition the femur and the hip socket, reposition the pelvis and low back over your pelvis. Thighs tight, thighs tight. Give me like 10 more seconds. Pressing your knees back. That's probably what it feels like. If you go in a way big hyperextension and you know that about yourself, then push your toes down more and try and activate your calf muscles a little bit. But for most of us, go ahead and just push your thighs back. And release and bring your feet back to neutral. And just notice if even that one thing changed how your feet are on the ground or what's happening. All right, from there, let's go right into a standing quad stretch. We're not going to mess around today. So find the wall if you need it. Grab onto your foot. If you need to use a strap, please grab it. And then from here, going into that quad stretch, the pelvis generally wants to do this bow that's happening in my back. So you have to use your butt muscles. Those are powerful muscles that hold you into the ground. Root your tailbone down toward the floor. That's going to put a big pull on that thigh. Then once you found your glutes, second to that are your abdominals. Pull those abdominals up and in so that you bring your pelvis more to neutral, your spine more to neutral, and hopefully those low back muscles get to let go a little bit. Hold and breathe. Switch sides. Reach up, notice the tendency. Find your butt muscle, that right butt muscle right now. If you're holding onto your left hand, use that butt muscle to pull you into the floor. Rooting, grounding, tailbone down, belly up and in. Open up that thigh. Secondary hip flexor muscles. Now, this is one of those places muscles can be long and weak, short and tight, short and weak. There's all kinds of different combinations. So we can't just assume that because something is short, it also means that it's super tight or working well. It can be positionally shortened, and that's where some orthopedic tests can come in to help us have more information about what's really going on. Okay, release that quad. Now we're gonna go to the other side. I want you to find your butt muscles. So go ahead and turn your feet out for right now. Find that neutral position in your pelvis. And then squeeze and release your butts like you're crushing walnuts. Squeeze together for right now. Just really get them to activate, tighten, and release your butt muscles. Get both sides to work that position into the outside of the hip. The greater trochanter pulls the femur bone external slightly, but I just am putting you in the best position for you to find those glutes. Squeeze and release. Squeeze, release. And now bring your feet to straight. Let's do 10 more. Feet straight ahead. Same thing. Squeeze and release. Find those glutes. Again, the glutes can reposition. If you're here and the glutes not firing or there's tightness in the front of the secondary hip flexors, this is going to help you come to more of a neutral position. We don't want to go so far under that we're losing the curve in our low back, but just to that neutral position where the glutes can activate well and can ground your body into the floor. So think of that. How do you pull yourself down to the floor? And you may feel, if you have a quad or hip flexor, I do, that's extra tight. And every time I fire up my glutes on this side, I can feel it down through the muscles of my quad. Anybody else? A little bit? Okay. Feet pointed straight ahead. Take it up to your arms again. Fold your fingers into your palms. Elbows or arms down by your side. Take it right up into elbow curls. Thumbs pointed down. So now we're keeping this in neutral. I want you to keep that slight activation of your glutes. You can even have a slight activation of your belly, low belly, just because we're helping to hold this pelvis in neutral that we just found. Then go right into your elbow curls. Elbows all the way together so they touch and all the way back. And 20. Good. Interlace your fingers, flip your hands over, then take it up into an overhead extension all the way up. Let your arms come up by your ears to start. Do your best to keep your spine in good alignment so that as you go up, you didn't just fall out of alignment again. So find your glutes, press through your glutes, let that bring you to neutral. Find your rib cage, pull it in a little bit, and then let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Then see if you can let your belly go and take big breaths, making the rib cage go out to that east to west direction while your arms are up there and your pelvis stays in alignment. Full breaths. Big inhale. Wide exhale. Squeeze. Inhale. Rib cage wide, even into the back body. See if you can get the back body to be even bigger. Exhale. One more. Full breath. Did anybody get any clicks in their rib cage? Awesome. Arms down. Nice. Okay, now let's take it down to the floor. We're going to go into a little bit more psoas, and so grab your block so that we can access your psoas a little bit better. And then we'll go back to low belly. So primary hip flexor, lumbar spine to inside of your leg. Again, I said when it gets short, one of the possibilities is that you go here. One of the possibilities is that you go into that kind of military short in your torso posture. So we're going to add some length to that by using your block. Come down onto your back. Put your block underneath your sacrum. Get a little more light on me. One moment. So neutral in your pelvis, and then pull your right leg in towards you and let your left leg just drop down. Daddy? That little bit of length is going to just ask the primary hip flexor from the low back all the way up. Make sure you're opening your shoulders, and then make this active. Find your belly. Let the hip flexor spin in the hip socket, or the femur, spin in the hip socket as your hip flexor pulls it up. And then everything stays in neutral. Lumbar spine stays in neutral. Everything stays in neutral as that leg gets to drop back down. We're going to do that 5 times. Move slowly. Pull it up. Bring it up to the level, just about to the other knee. And then send it back out. If you have a pop or a click in your hip, you could play with the position of the knee, slightly internally rotate that knee or slightly externally rotate that knee and see if you can change whatever tissue is going over a bump. It's called an epicondyle. Sometimes that tendon can flip over that and cause that popping sound. And switch sides. Hold it in, find neutral, take a deep breath, then drop it out and just check how does it compare. Now you can have tight quads and hip flexors. Most of us have one thing that's determining the position of the pelvis more than the other. And we test this in a very similar position by like laying on a massage table and seeing if this leg can drop beyond the hip. So can it go into hip extension? Can it go beyond your hip? This is a little bit of hip extension right now. If it can do that easily and it's not like stuck up here, then probably it's your quad, not your psoas, that's pulling you out of alignment. So that's, if you get to here and you're like, wow, my leg won't go into extension, then that shortens your stance, it changes your gait. Go ahead and go up and down 5 times. So then you've got work to do to let that either primary or secondary hip flexors release up and down. Nothing else is moving. Just letting it spin in the hip socket. Last one. And release off your block so that you're in neutral. And then go ahead and rock your pelvis, pelvic tilts. So if your quads are pulling you into too much arch in your back, your lumbar erectors usually get short and tight. So as you do your pelvic tilts right now, I want you to feel flat low back. So that's actually hip flexion with the psoas as part of what that does, as well as the rectus muscle, rectus abdominis. low back muscles get to lengthen. Even your glutes could squeeze here a little bit as you do that big tuck. Then go the opposite way. Put an arch in your back. Pubic bone goes down, back arches. Make sure your shoulders are square, and then just go back and forth between those. That should be a smooth action. Now, if you had one side quad or psoas that was pulling more than the other, you might feel this a little bit in your SI joint. It might be uneven in your pull. That would be really common, but not optimal. All right, bottom of your feet together, let your knees drop out into a frog. Let the rotation of the leg bone just pull on some of these adductor muscles and hip muscles, pelvis in neutral, glutes get to shorten a little bit here, and then reach your arms up to the sky. Pull your arms over your head to the floor and back up. Keep going. Let's do 20 of these. Then bring your legs back in and go onto your hands and knees. So now we're going to tie in some of these side muscles here to the position of your pelvis. So first, I just want you to thread your shoulders. Let your shoulders come all the way together on your back. Not really a change in your spine, but just a sinking of your shoulder blades. Melt your heart. And then press the floor away from you. And feel the muscles on the side body as well as the muscles in your arms and shoulders turn on. Slide down, press up. Do that about 10 times. As you do that, there's a little rotation that happens in the arm bone. You should go, points of your elbows come down toward your knees a little bit as you go into that protraction, and then as you push away, a little bit of the flat parts of your elbows point more toward each other, down and up. And then without moving, just find your glutes, kind of like you're pressing your legs down into the floor again more. Not a big curl here, but just neutral. Find your butt muscles, squeeze and release those glutes again. How do you ground more? Good, just squeeze and hold them tight. Do you have both sides working well? Without moving your pelvis out of neutral, can you find those butt muscles tight, 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 tight? And find neutral, so some push down into the floor so that you can maintain the position of your pelvis with your right leg, right glute working. As you lift your left leg up, find your low belly, keep it working, and then down and up 10 times. Lift and lower. Switch sides. And then come down onto your side. You have the option of clamshells, just feet together, knees lifted, or that clamshell with a lift so that you're getting that whole underside, serratus, everything on the side body, stabilizing the position of your spine as you do it. So that would look like this. Lift your hips off the floor and then lift that top one down and come all the way down. Let's go 10 of these. Otherwise, 20, just lift and lower and get that top glute working. You decide today. Find those butt muscles. Butt muscles oppose the quad, oppose the hip flexors. Hip extensors oppose the hip flexors. So when we're trying to open tight hip flexors, we want to really fire up those glutes. We can change the curve of the low back. We can strengthen the posterior chain of your body, switch sides. We can use the biggest muscle in your body that often gets ignored and saggy to help maintain all this great position. Hold it there, lift, 10 of these if you're going up, 20 if you're just lifting that top knee. Awesome. Back to hands and knees. Come off your knees. So now the muscles that are on the front, the quad muscles, are lengthened because you're bending your knee in knee flexion. So bring your right leg up. My yoga teacher has a 10-year-old son, and just because my kids watched this also, they said when Thor comes down and he's coming down from another planet and he comes down and he lands with one hand up in the sky and one hand down like this on the earth, that's because he has a really solid butt muscle that he doesn't fall over, or he doesn't need both hands to hit the ground. So you can think of that. Fire up that glute on the right leg, the leg that's forward, to help determine the position there. So that's helping to ground you. And then this glute also, in case you were in too much hip flexion, this glute rooting down is helping to just hold that good position in your pelvis. So keep that there. Let's go ahead and rotate. So to the left, open it up. Big breath, use your oblique muscles. Squeeze, nothing gets to move in your pelvis. It's staying totally neutral and stable. Both butt muscles are working. Open it up, go the other way. Over, rotate, big twist. Keep going. Neutral. One more time, both sides. Open it up, pelvis stays neutral, doesn't go anywhere. Open, twist your spine, find your oblique muscles. Those muscles that go from the rib cage down to the opposite hip bone. They pull you a little bit forward in your upper back. Twist. Open it up, big full breath. Other way. This time, go ahead and lean forward, hook the elbow on your knee so that you're in this position. Find that oblique, press your hands together. Open it up more, twist bigger into that spine. If you want a little more of a shoulder opener, you can take this top hand, place it behind you, and keep going. Open that shoulder a little more. Pressing down through this elbow on your knee, Glutes still working, pulling with your belly, opening that shoulder, and release. Switch sides. Find this on this position. Split leg position. Pushing down with that left leg, so that left glute is firing. The right glute also working just to keep you there. Quad lengthening. And then arms out, twist your body, open it up, breathe. Other way. Twist. Fight those forces that want to let your pelvis rotate with you. Notice how well or not well you rotate to this side. Open it up one more. First side again. Big twist. And second side. And hook that elbow across your knee, hands into prayer. Take it a little bit forward, knee can come over your foot or even over to your toes. And then think of rib cage pulling toward that opposite hip, open that space, rotate more. If you want a little more, this hand can come up and go behind your back, and you can open that shoulder. 3 breaths. And release out of it. Both hands to the floor, cats and dogs. Round and arch. Nice. Stay here. Just go straight hip extension now. So find that glute, stabilize. Take your left leg up and back behind you. And then just keep everything stable. So butt working, belly in. Find hip extension. Take that leg behind your body, behind where neutral would be. Like neutral would be like that, like you're standing. Then take that hip behind you and just hold. Root your tailbone back. Build some endurance in there. And release. Second side, take it into neutral. Then lift without the belly going anywhere. Hip extension. Hold. And release. Have a seat. And bring one foot back behind you. We're going to go into a big quad stretch here. If this isn't okay for your knee or your back or your hip, please skip it. It's much better if this foot is tucked underneath you. You can roll the fleshy part of your calf out. But if your knee says no, just wait for us for a minute. Do a quad stretch lying on your side or something. If this is okay for you, tuck your tailbone and come back to your elbows. And maybe even down to the floor. Find that pull, so root your tailbone down, find your glute, and let it just really pull on those thigh muscles and get your pelvis to as neutral of a position as possible. switch sides. Now, I'm even going to do this one on my side because that's my knee. So this would be an option here for you to just go side quad stretch. Press your knee down to the floor, open that up. Breathe into that thigh. Tuck your tailbone. Open space. And release. Onto your back. Okay, now we're going to use these muscles. So also, if your psoas was short and it was pulling your pelvis under, it would also shorten your hamstrings. So we're going to go after neutral pelvis. We're going to use the hip flexors because, like I said, they could be short and tight or short and weak. So keep a little space between your lower back and the floor. You could even tuck your hands under your back to maintain that healthy space. And then you're going to do what we call pullbacks. So knees coming up, keeping this space, working your quads and hip flexors by straightening the knee. They are knee extensors, hip flexors, and lengthening your hamstring, the muscles on the back of your legs. Then come down and release. In, up, down, release. Your belly also gets a little work here. Two more. And then feet on the floor, go back to your glutes. Lifting your hips off the floor, finding your glutes, hugging in, neutral pelvis. So you could do this in different ways with your posture and still be short in certain areas. So think of finding the back muscles, going up to neutral, coming back down. Lift and lower, pressing down through the floor. Sit bones come down and a little bit narrow as you lift. Find your glutes. Five more. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Hold it up there, up on your toes, big toe pressing down into the floor. Let them burn. 10, 9, 8, you should feel it down here. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Good. Excellent job. Roll to your side and come all the way up to standing. Just check that out for a few minutes or a few seconds. Feel how that feels in your body. Is it feeling more balanced? Like you've got a little more work happening here. Okay, the other thing I said about glutes was that it allowed you to lower yourself safely to the floor. So that would just look like a squat. So go ahead and go into a squat, down and up. Keep going, down and up, and see if you can just feel the glutes doing that work, pulling you down to the floor and going back up, getting to neutral, down and up. Nice, now up onto your toes. Find that balance. That's going to make it a little bit harder. Big toes pressing down hard into the floor. Knees go forward, hips go back. Find your glutes. Use them, hold it there. Arms into cactus arms, hold that position. 10 times up and down, move those shoulders. Glutes literally pulling you safely down to the floor here. Fire them up, posterior chain, and all the way up to standing. Release it down. Good, we're gonna do that one more time. Up onto your toes, sit down, find your glutes, arms up into cactus arms, arm glide over your head and down, big toes working down hard into the floor, calf muscles working, hamstrings working, butt muscles working, back muscles working. And release. Awesome. Feet hip width apart. Put a little bit of an arch into your low back, hip. So basically you're going from neutral to hip hinging. Gentle rounding in your back. Find length. Find that transverse abdominis we've been talking about a lot lately, like you're breathing out through pursed lips or through a straw or blowing up a balloon. The one that acts like a girdle and creates length in your spine. That can oppose some of that tightness in the psoas. And then hands into that sphere of tension. Then lift it out. Use that as a lever. Hips go back more, arms go forward more, back muscles working, butt muscles working, everything on fire from the inner heel all the way up that inner leg. And coming up. Nice. Grab your chair or your block. Runner's stretch. Right foot forward, left foot back. About 2 feet between your feet. Again, I said, if you're pulled into this like kind of military position and the hip flexor could be short on the inside, then your hamstrings are short also. Let's free that up by getting this length in a runner stretch. So hips square, right hip pulls back, left hip pulls forward. Maybe you can come down to your elbows. Lengthen your spine. This time your tailbone gets to lift. Try to create a little arch in your low back. Breathe. Switch. Maybe the elbows are possible. How are they different from one hamstring to the other? Is there more tension on one leg? Thighs tight, And press that out of the way. Come into your full downward facing dog pose. Keep your body long, come into crouching cat, so slight bend at the knees, butt lifted, arch in the low back, rounding through the rib cage so that you're creating that kind of bow shape in your back. Hold, look forward, breathe, 10 more seconds. And release it down. Once more, round and arch. And then onto your back, foot circles, point flexes. Tie in the ankles into the knee, into the hip, in that great neutral pelvic position that we just found. Left leg down on the, let's go left leg first. Right leg down on the floor. Pull the left leg in, hold underneath your shoulders, or hold underneath your knee, but adjust your shoulders so they're flat on your back. And then circle 20 circles all the way around with your toes. Reverse. Point and flex. Switch sides. Big circles. Reverse. Point and flex. And then send your legs out straight. You can do a couple femur rotations before you let your shoulders settle into your Shavasana, or place your legs over your block into static back. You decide. So hopefully, no matter how you came into class today, with a short psoas or short hip flexors, secondary hip flexors, quads, that the work that we did allowed that to open up and lengthen, and that we really found those opposing glute muscles. No sleepy glutes in my class. For now, knowing that those muscles also have emotional connections into your body, I just want you to feel, experience what happens when we work all that space in and around the pelvis, into the leg muscles, into the trunk. We didn't leave the shoulders out of that, but just allow all that great work to settle, to integrate. Be present to the quiet space. Notice the space in between the breaths. The space in between the thoughts. That space, that awareness is always present. And when you can see the mind chatter for what it is, you can begin to hang out with that quiet space more often. Just like a bear retreats to the cave to go sleep into the deep sleep and be with the silence, you too can retreat into the cave, even if it's for just moments every day, and get quiet enough to find the insight that exists there. I'm going to give you 1 full minute of just silence. Be mindful of your breath again. If you want to stay here, you may turn off your computer. If you want to come back around and have a goodbye with the group, then you can add some movement to your body and come back around. If you want to speak, you need to unmute yourself. Thank you always, as always, for showing up. It's such a pleasure to be able to have you on my screen, in class, as a community, and for your continued support. I really appreciate it.
Can I ask a class question?
Yeah.
So many of us, obviously, we have the tight quads, but what about how does the hamstring being tight throw you off? You just kind of mentioned that at the end as we were doing the runner stretch.
Yeah. So if you have a hamstring that pulls down, the hamstring attaches up at the quad. So
Yeah.
if the inside hip flexor gets short and then the hamstring pulls down, then you get stuck kind of in that slightly tucked under position. And
Got it.
then so that can happen, like let's say you sit at a desk all the time and the hip flexor starts to get short and tight because you're not sitting in good posture, and then you go to stand up and you're actually in hip extension kind of all the time because the hip is that. So if neutral would be here, and if I was neutral, this would be hip extension. But if I'm here and that's pulled into it, then the quad is long. Some of this gets short and weak usually, and the hip flexor gets tight, and the hamstring gets tight just by virtue of the position that it's in. And your muscles are actually lengthened by hanging out there.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how that can kind of pull down. Now there's one other posture that has tight hamstrings we didn't really talk about, but that's the main one that can kind of show up in all of that. Again,
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. The hip is
I think I'm that one. Not that one. Yeah.
Relative to where it's supposed to be.
Okay. Cool. That was awesome. Really, really great.
Yeah. Thank you, Kyra.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyra.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kyra.
Thank you, Kyra.
Nice to see everybody.
You too. Take care. Be safe.
So I have a question too, Kyra.
Yes.
When we went to lay down into Shavasana,
Yeah.
I kind of moved my feet back and forth, my knees. So I did some,
Like
sorry,
knee drop.
yes, knee drops.
Yeah.
And I really felt a pain when I went to the left in my right hip on the inside of it. So iliacus type area.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do for that one? Because it doesn't feel like psoas. It feels more like iliacus.
Okay.
Just sit in that stretch for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just breathe it out and let it go and yep.
Right there.
Yep. Yeah, you could even dig into it a little bit. You know how deep it is, so you can kind of go after it.
Yeah.
If it can give you some space.
Yeah. It's just difficult to get the leverage when it's on your stomach.
There's that physical therapist that made like a hook that you lie on top of.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, yeah.
And it, like when here at Native Massage, if you want them to do psoas work, you have to sign a separate liability because you can get bruised. Like it just, you're going, your abs are 4 layers deep or above that. And so being able to get into that iliacus and into that psoas, you just have to get so far that it's likely that you'll have bruises outside of your skin to really get to it. So I know that PT made, it's literally like it looks like a hook, and you can
one of those.
and it's up in there for you.
Ooh, yeah.
I know, I see the ads on Facebook every once in a while that comes up, but you can do that with a ball also is a pretty effective way, and you usually don't get bruised, but a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball that's a little harder, that you can just lie on it and let it just get in there a little bit to give you some space. It can definitely pull the hip up into the hip socket.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want that freedom of movement this way and you're too high in there, then you're grinding on that cartilage.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All right, thanks, Kyra. Everybody have a good weekend.
You too. Happy 4th. Be safe.
Yes.
No fire.
Bye, Kyra. Thanks.
Bye.